What's going on, Los Angeles football fans? UCLA, USC, fight on, go Bruins. This is the Victory Bell Selection Show on the LA Football Network. Episode 2 of this rendition of this 4-part series, all culminating on November 19th at the Rose Bowl when these two LA Giants meet in the historic venue that is Pasadena's Rose Bowl. I'm your host, Ryan Dyer, joined by the best panel in the business. We'll go around the horn very quickly. Host of the Bruin Bible, Will Decker. What's up, brother? How we doing?
Doing great. Excited to be back for episode 2. A lot of fun things to talk about. And, breaking down the best team in Los Angeles, your UCLA Bruins. 4's up, baby.
Jump into the other side for maybe a rebuttal on that. Long Beach Poly legend, USC Trojan player and alum, and now a current coach. Coach Alfred Rowe, what's up, my man? How we doing?
Hey, I'm doing good, man. No complaints. Moved up one in the ranking. The SEC bias is real.
Very real. Very real, which maybe we'll touch on. Maybe we'll touch on that. So back over to my co-host of the LA Football Show, the Madman, alum of both these prestigious universities, Jamal Badney. What's up, my man? How we doing on this Wednesday, I guess we are?
Doing well, Ryan. Excited to jump into it. And we really, really pissed off NC State's AD. And I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, you put a tweet out, which maybe we can touch on later. And last but certainly not least, our USC Trojans beat writer reps a team in the pros that we will not mention here, but for this purposes, USC Trojan faithful. Phil Robinson, what's up, man? How we doing?
Man, Ryan, why you keep bringing up old stuff, man? This is the college football show. I don't go talking about anybody else's pro choices. We're doing well. It's another week in the top 10, which is more than I can say for these gentlemen to my left. So yes. We are ready to get it happening, ready to get going. I'm looking forward to this. Next week can't come fast enough. I'm ready to do it now.
And you're living that top 10 life. Last week you were in the illustrious Ocean View Palace. Now you got the nice brick wall. You got many bedrooms in that top 10 estate, it looks like. So looking good. But on episode 2 of this episode of Victory Huddle Podcast, we're going to talk about how we got here. Currently, as it stands right now, as kind of mentioned a little back and forth in the college football rankings, UCLA is ranked 12th. USC is ranked 8th. Both of these teams are 9-1. They both have everything kind of in front of them for the most part, maybe need a little bit of help to really solidify themselves as a potential college football berth, but all culminates on that November 19th game. So let's get into how we got here. Will, let's start with you, brother. Obviously, UCLA finishes last year, 8-4. They weren't able to play in the bowl game due to COVID reasons, unfortunately, but it was the best year under Chip Kelly, an up and down year, to be honest. But a lot of unknown going into the offseason. We talked about it a lot on the network, a lot on your show, but they solidify their choice to keep Chip Kelly, and obviously that has paid off. Talk to us a little bit on your thoughts just talk to us about the offseason leading up to this year before we even get to this year.
It was a chaotic offseason, to say the least. I think Jamal and I went in depth on the Bruin Bible. We've probably hypothesized that about 70% of the fan base was ready to move on from Chip Kelly last year. He was 18-25 despite a very solid season. Could have gotten to 9 wins with the bowl game. The bowl game, unfortunately, got canceled. We're all cool with it on the West Coast, but the NC State guy, not very cool with it on the AD and the voting committee. So Chip Kelly decides, and, mutually with Martin Jarman, to come back. They signed a new contract. But the biggest comeback of all was Charbonnet returning. I think I gave that, probably a 90% chance that he was going to the pros, especially with the running back lifespan. You talk about the average lifespan of a typical running back is about 3 years. So for him to come back, and play in college again this year, we've seen that pay off. And coming into the season, we knew we had a very, easy schedule, so to speak, with the non-conference opponents that we had. Even with those, games, we were struggling mightily in different areas. The offensive line looked out of sync. We had a very close game against South Alabama. DTR couldn't really find a rhythm, in those first 3 games. And there's a lot of, worrying, because this was the year that we felt that Chip could get to 10 wins and above. I predicted them to have 10 wins in the preseason. But what we have seen is as soon as we got into Pac-12 play, Chip unleashed 2 different guys. We saw the real Charbonnet and kind of what he was able to do. I think he was saving him for Pac-12 play because he knew he had to rely on him, so to speak. And we saw the emergence of Jake Bobo on the outside, a receiver that's been consistently making big plays for UCLA, giving them kind of a trifecta at the quarterback, running back, and wide receiver in terms of offensive threats. So we've seen that happen. They had the one hiccup loss, against a very talented team in Oregon. But, September 30th, they come out and they beat Washington, a ranked opponent at home. Next week, we beat Utah, a ranked opponent at home. And it kind of keeps the momentum swinging. We lose to Oregon, but we've beaten Stanford and Arizona. And now we're sitting at 8-1. I think it's a very impressive year. Chip Kelly has shown his ability, he's kind of reclaimed the throne of maybe the best rushing mind on the West Coast. So a lot of great things are going strong for UCLA right now. 8-1, hard to complain. If they get it done this week, we'll be 9-1 heading into the Victory Bell game. So a lot to look forward to for UCLA fans.
Absolutely. Before I jump over to the SC side, and I'll start with Phil, but before I do that, just because it's on the same line, Jamal, let me ask you this, and we talked about it a lot too. Going back to the offseason, Dillon Gabriel transfers to UCLA, commits to UCLA. And it seems like he is the quarterback of the future. We were very excited about it, knowing the talent, not knowing if DTR would return. Obviously, DTR decides to return, which then forces Dillon Gabriel to transfer where he ends up at Oklahoma. How big of a move was that? Or how big of a move was it not that Dillon Gabriel is the quarterback of this team and DTR is?
Ryan, it's a great question. I think that our answer at the time of the move and our answer today are probably two very different answers. I think there was a lot of excitement when that Gabriel move happened because even though DTR showed flashes culminating in last year's Victory Bell game where he put on an absolute show, there were still questions about his ability to put a whole season together, a whole body of work together. And there was a lot of talk that, hey, he's been here 4 years. Maybe it's time now that we turn the page. Maybe it's time we need to evaluate Chip with a different quarterback before we can make a credible assessment about whether or not he is a viable coach for the foreseeable future. And so I think that there was, Will mentioned sort of the 70% metric there. I think there was probably a greater than 50% metric of fans that were disappointed when Gabriel ultimately transferred and DTR stayed. So very, very interesting. But I think what has been so significant, and then I'll leave it back to you, Ryan, is just that synergy, that connection between Chip and DTR this year. And that, I think, ultimately above everything else this year, that relationship of coach and quarterback is really what's propelled this team to the next level, that inherent trust that they have in one another, because they both needed each other in various ways to make this work. Chip needed DTR to prove to the college football world that he still has it, and DTR needed Chip to prove to the college football and the NFL world that he's still a viable candidate and prospect at the next level.
Yeah, I think everyone would gladly say the best case scenario played out for UCLA. We don't even need to talk about what's happened at Oklahoma and all that down there. But I think just when you see how this season has progressed, the maturation of DTR, how well he's played, the synergy you mentioned, it all played out well. And I would say almost higher than what was expected even going into the year. Phil, looking at SC and looking at their offseason, obviously couldn't get much worse than what happened last year. 4-8, Clay Helton fired in week 2. You get an interim head coach. You get a fun game against Washington State. You think potentially the quarterback of the future is there on the roster. And then they shock the world right after the season ends and they get Lincoln Riley away from Oklahoma when no one called that. No one saw that coming. And obviously we've seen the effect. So talk to me about USC's offseason, how we got here and what that move for Lincoln Riley meant for this program.
So when you talk about the offseason, the first thing I'd ask is you'd have to think long and hard to think who had a better offseason than USC. For all the players that they brought in through the transfer portal, through acquiring Lincoln Riley, through all of the fame and all the prosperity that's come back to the University of Southern California, for all of the attention that we have, with a coach, just one man, turn this from a laughing stock back into a team that's sitting on the outside edge looking in at the college football playoffs. And me and my partner Alfred have said that they weren't quite ready for the college football playoffs, and yet here we stand. We're talking about we're setting ourselves up for the largest game of the season between crosstown rivals, which nobody saw coming at the beginning of the year. And after that, there's one more game, and the winner pretty much is going to take on Oregon for the Pac-12 championship. And the winner of that game would probably be seeded in the college football playoff, because Oregon is currently number 3, I believe.
6, I think. Yeah, but yeah, either way.
Are they 6? Because I saw that. Oh, it must have been somebody's article that was wrong.
Or maybe coaches poll their 3, maybe.
Yeah. But they're sitting there. The Pac-12 has been great, but SC's moves have continued to set it up. They're recruiting even better than they were. The fence has gone back up on the state of California, and the top recruits in high school are no longer leaving the state.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this is what it's all about. Unfortunately, they're leaving the Pac-12, and for all that we've talked about, they're getting an even bigger, and UCLA as well, but they're getting a bigger, better TV deal. They're expanding their reach. They just won on so many fronts this offseason that it's not even funny.
Yeah. And you could make the argument. I'm not saying it's the only reason, because obviously it was, Mike Bone and Carol Folt that were leading the charge. But you could make the argument that deal to the Big Ten doesn't happen if not for Lincoln Riley being the head coach. Just the what he brought to the program instantly in rising its awareness again, and instantly knowing this team was going to be competitive again. I don't think, there's been some disappointing, which we'll get into. Obviously, the defense has not been great. But I still think if you were to sit there back in December and say, hey, going into the 10th game of the year, this team is 8-1. I think a lot of people said that's a hell of a first year for Lincoln Riley and company, comparing where this program was just a month before. So, Alfred, your thoughts, being someone that's been in the program, knows what the standard is. You've talked about it. We talked on a live show how, your grade on the season is probably lower than others just because the standard is Georgia, is Alabama, is those 05 teams. That's the standard. But based on where they were and where they are now, what's been your takeaway from this team so far?
So the key to me is the product that they've been putting on the field, right? And last year, just like the problems that UCLA is having this year, the laughing stock was how empty the Coliseum was, right? And it's not the fact that SC's always has had losing seasons in the past, but they still were able to put stands in the Rose Bowl. Why? Because they were still able to put a decent product on the field. The biggest change with SC this year is that they're putting a product on the field that's worth watching, right? Did all that come on Lincoln Riley? I think so, but the fact that you're able to bring Caleb Williams in, Mario Williams in, Jordan Addison, Travis Dye, right? And then when your top receivers go down and you still have backup receivers who were catching for 100 yards and they weren't getting any burn all year, like the product is there that people want to see. So all you had to do is just ship the product. And I just think it always goes back to the culture. The culture is back at SC. When you watch SC, you should be able to feel the culture, right? So when you watch an SC game now, you're like, oh, okay, this is the SC that I'm used to, right? It might not be running back you anymore, but we have a quarterback that's going to be up for a Heisman. Go figure. That's a normal thing, right? So it's back off of one hire. They took a gamble, they put the chips all in, and it happened to work, right? Is it a national championship or bust in the next few years? I don't think so. But pretty soon, this is going to be a national championship team, and things are going to be back to where they were in the past.
Yeah, with the state of college football now, with NIL, Jamal and I talk about it a lot. Like, I think college football now, you can't rely so much on your past. You have to look forward to your future. Obviously, brand identity helps, but where USC is, the location, the culture, who their coach is, like this, whether or not they win a national championship year, this is a top 5 program every single year, just based on all that. And it's already become that, as they said, at 8, just 1 year in. So it's pretty fascinating and fun to watch for all of us. So sticking with product, Jamal, let's go back to UCLA, because UCLA's put on a bad product for 4 years under Chip Kelly before. Last year was a better product, but 3 years prior was a very unwatchable product because they were building something, and it takes time to build. We just talked about Lincoln Riley built something in 9 games, and it's pretty remarkable. But Chip Kelly, it took a little more time. There wasn't the same prestige in terms of football legacy at UCLA, so they built it a little differently, a little slower, but they did it his way. And now I would argue that product is just as good, if not better, to watch on the field. You talk about a 50 burger they put up at Arizona State with 400 yards of rushing. So talk to us about the Chip Kelly product that we get to see at the Rose Bowl every week now.
Yeah, Ryan, and I think we've talked about this over the years. A program like USC, given the pedigree, the culture, the resources, they are in a position where if you can get that right person behind the wheel, change can happen very quickly. And I think more than Lincoln Riley, I think what propelled this Big Ten deal to happen is the conference recognizing USC's willingness to pay big dollars again. And I think that in that regard, I think the timing really worked out. When you see these nil collectives on the SC side, a lot of mega donors have passed away this year. Think about the timing there. Would USC have had the funds allocated 12 months later to go get Lincoln Riley this year as opposed to last year? Maybe, maybe not. So it was tremendous timing for USC, and said, hey, we just need a competent driver to really drive this Bugatti to where it needs to go. For UCLA, it's a different story because academic standards are different. 80% of the recruiting class needs to have a 3.0 GPA, and a 3.0 GPA versus a 2.3 GPA, which is the NCAA standard, that is a chasm to overcome, especially when you're talking about top football prospects. So for Chip Kelly, he needed to be more innovative and say, look, why are we wasting valuable time and resources going in the traditional recruiting route if we really like a kid and a kid really understands what UCLA can do for them, both on the field as well as off the field, as well as academically, as well as socially, spiritually, we're going to invest the time to recruit that kid. Otherwise, let's really use this transfer portal, because now that 3.0 GPA goes out the window, because now you're looking at kids who are already in college. And that requirement goes away, and now you level the playing field. But it takes time. It takes organizational inertia and a willingness to do things to really change thinking. And so that's why for Chip Kelly, it's been a process. And I commend Martin Jarman. I commend Dan Guerrero. I commend Chancellor Gene Block for sticking with Chip. And this is the year that we're really reaping the rewards. But Ryan, it's been a bit of an EKG this season. I don't think at the start we thought we were reaping the rewards. The very first few minutes of the season, Bowling Green blocks a punt for a touchdown. We're down 7-0 in the first game, 4 minutes into the season. Game 3 against South Alabama, it took a fluke South Alabama fake field goal play for UCLA to get that ball back to win that game. I don't think we were necessarily convinced with the Colorado performance in a lot of ways. So that first month of the season, there were still questions. But I think what Chip has been able to master is really understanding his players, understanding he needed to preserve Charbonnet for the conference season and give him 175 plus carries, but also understand who DTR is. And I've made this comparison on a couple of our other shows. I see Caleb Williams as like a Steph Curry, and I see DTR as like a Russell Westbrook. And Caleb Williams is a cool, calm, collected kid. He can put 12 games together. DTR is such a fiery individual like Westbrook. It used to be like Kevin Garnett when he used to warm up in games, and Kevin Garnett would have a sweat. I mean, he'd be exhausted 50 minutes before tip-off because he'd be so hyped in warm-ups before the game because it was all about the aggression. It was all about the intensity. It is hard to put 12 great games together when you have that type of a personality. And I think Chip has sort of mastered that in year 5 of how to dial it in with DTR, where DTR is going to give you 4 iconic performances a year, but you got to space those 4 out. And that curve sort of revved up to Oregon, to Utah and Washington. We had a little bit of a blip. Now we're revving up again for that SC game, for him to put together another iconic performance. So I think part of it was Chip understanding the new landscape, Ryan, of what he needed to deal with. And part of it was the emotional element of understanding his players, which is something he doesn't get a lot of credit for because he doesn't have the flashy personality and the great sunglasses and the great smile and the Hollywood charisma. But Chip, emotionally, I would argue, is one of the most emotionally intelligent coaches in college football today.
Yeah, and we talked.
Ryan,
please jump in.
So if I'm Chip Kelly, I keep this style. I think, and I don't know, but this is just my opinion from what I see from the outside looking in. I think UCLA has finally figured out we're a basketball school, right? Let's put our money into basketball. But if we could create a competitive football team, we become even better, right? So we don't have to be national championship or bust every year. But if we get Chip Kelly developed classes and we have 2 down years and we have two up years, right? Or maybe 3 up years, 1 down year, and we just develop that, I think Chip Kelly has a home until he's ready to retire. This strategy that I think that they took at UCLA is the best approach that they've taken in a long time because of what happened on the national recruiting front before all the money was involved and all those things. He developed a class. He took a class, and this is what you get from this development. Like, majority of this class has been together for these 5 years, right? So if he's able to do that again and he creates this culture and keeps it going, Chip Kelly has a home for the rest of his career.
Yeah. Well, I think the other thing too, you can liken it to, and I think they have obviously more resources, and we've seen this year, sitting at 12, but I liken it a little bit to, at the great Bill Schneider over at Kansas State that really kind of utilized that transfer portal a little bit and built his program differently year in and year out to, compete the best that they could in that conference. I think UCLA has more resources to do more so, but it's kind of like taking that approach a little bit. So we'll wrap up here kind of quickly. We'll go around the horn one more time, but Phil, I'll go back to you. Looking at the product in the field, looking at this season, 9 games in, what has been the most surprising thing to you? Could be a good thing, could be a bad thing, could be a player performance, could be a coaching performance. What's been the biggest surprise to you about this USC football team this year?
Travis Dye. And Alfred will tell you, when we first did our very first show, I was trashing the running backs. I was on them bad. And Travis Dye is the USC leader from scrimmage. He's the touchdown leader. He's been everything that you could ask for and more. And when you look at this roster and all of the stars on it, the guy that you expected to be behind Caleb Williams was Jordan Addison, not Travis Dye.
Yep. Yeah. And I'll tell you this too, Phil, being in the media room with these interviews, Travis Dye is a special leader, takes complete ownership of everything. You can tell how passionate he is about this game, about this team, about how he knows this is a special season, how he knows that this, the standard is the standard and they got to go out and claim that and reclaim that. He's a Norco kid. I know he's at Oregon, but he's a SoCal kid. He knows what it's like to be down there. So love that answer. Love Travis Dye. Will, UCLA, a lot of surprises, I think, this year. A lot of not surprises. We knew how good DTR could be. I think it's been a little surprising how great he's been. Zach Charbonnet, no surprise. We knew how special he is, and he's just emulating that. So what has been surprising to you? Coaching, players, record, whatever it has been, good, bad, ugly. What's been the surprise for you?
The biggest surprise for me, it's 2 areas, and it's both in the trenches. I mean, we came out of the first game saying that the offensive line was just problematic to begin with. A lot of new faces. Bowling Green got 2 sacks and 7 pressures on DTR in game number 1. False starts. It was all over the field, just a lot of issues. And, there was some of that, in the non-conference, but how Chip Kelly and new offensive line coach Tim Drevno have come together to build the line moving forward. The amount of pressures they had combined against Utah and Oregon, arguably 2 of the best defensive lines within the entire conference, 2 in 2 games. That is as impressive as hell's stat when you see where they came from to begin with. So I love what they've done there. And just how Chip has finally found a way to generate pressure with the front 4. Like, we had to send 7, 8 guys in the box, in previous years with Jerry Azanero to generate pressure, and we look at guys like Quantrez Knight. The funniest joke for UCLA fans, this safety was a defensive end. He was just blitzing off the edge every single time. This guy didn't even play safety. But when you have the, personnel of the Murphy twins being there, Latu coming in, making plays, we finally have a stable group where these guys are getting after the quarterbacks. Latu, whether you want to make the argument that he's defensive player of the year or, Tui Tuilapopo from USC, both these guys are having hell of a year. And, Latu, 7.5 sacks. The Murphy twins are in on a lot of action. I've been thoroughly impressed with the progressions those units have made under Chip Kelly this year.
Absolutely. Yeah. Tui Pelotu leading the NCAA, I believe, with 9 sacks. And Latu, you mentioned with the 7.5. Latu, what a special story. I mean, being
not talked about enough. Not talked about enough.
Not hardly at all outside the West Coast. It's crazy to me. Like, what a special year this kid's having, sitting out of football. A year and a half?
He did not play a football game since 2019. So he has medically retired. Doctors told him he could never play again. Back on the field. It's one thing to play. I think that's a great story, but to just kick ass while you're doing it, that makes it even sweeter. So, if anyone's going to be touting this Latu story that needs to get out more, it should be the LA Football Network.
Well, I think there may be an LAFB documentary coming soon. Laiatu Latu. That could be a tease up for that. So, Coach Rowe, biggest surprise about this USC program thus far in 2022?
The biggest surprise, believe it or not, is the secondary for USC. I think the secondary, I after the spring game, you can go back and watch me and Phil's show, and I just completely bashed the secondary after the spring game. I'm like, we're headed for the same thing. Nothing's changed. The coaches are the same, this and that. All of a sudden, now you have 17 picks. And you lead the conference the nation in turnovers. You lead the nation in turnover margin. Like, this secondary is complete ball hawk. I am thoroughly impressed with what this secondary does. Both safeties will come up and hit you. The corners' techniques are flawless. I mean, they play in the Pac-12, and they're known for getting a bunch of PIs. Those dudes are legit. Like, that secondary for USC is very, very, very good. Schematically, they're not put in the best situation. Personally, I would play them more in match so they could get more interceptions, but it is what it is. What do I know? I'm on a podcast. I don't make millions of dollars, right? But that secondary that they have at USC is very, very good.
You played some on the back end. So, I think, so let me ask you this though, before I end it with Jamal, just because out of curiosity, obviously the big issue with this defense has been, stopping the pass. I mean, we saw Jack Plummer have over 400 yards. We saw Dalton Kincaid have over 200 yards as a tight end. So is that more scheme, or is that secondary breakdowns, or so praising the secondary? How do you explain that?
So when Dalton Kincaid got his 200 yards, he was getting a bunch of passes that were within 7 yards. He wasn't hitting them. They weren't hitting them down the field. So it's a lot of underneath zone stuff. There's a lot of holes in SC zone up underneath. A ton of holes. Like, we could sit and I could pause a film and I could count every single hole there is. Like, there's a lot of holes because they don't. All right, so me, I'm a 6-man box guy, regardless. I'm always going to have one more. So if you're in 10 personnel, which is pretty much 2 receivers, 1 running back, there's always going to be 5 offensive linemen. I'm going to have 4 D linemen and 2 backers. You won't be able to block me. You'll never have enough. They play a lot of 5-man box, and they walk guys out, and they create holes. So there's a lot of holes out on the edge. So where Dalton Kincaid was just running, catch and pass, running, catch and pass. Like, he found the hole, and the quarterback found him, right? What's my guy's name, Phil? You want him to go to the Raiders. Rising. Cam Rising was there. He just found him. He was open within 5 to 7 yards. It was nothing deep. He had a couple of big plays that were down the field, but most of it was right there. He sat down in the zone, which USC gave him. It's a schematic thing.
Yeah. No, okay. Great explanation. I knew that's why I wanted to ask you, because I knew you would explain it well, because I see that too, but coming from you, I think it sounds a lot more truthful than maybe when I say it. So, but hey, Kalen Bullock, stud. I freaking love Kalen Bullock on the back end. Super bright young kid, sophomore, still have another year, true sophomore, still wearing braces. I love it. He's like a special dude.
Cam Bullock is number 7, right?
Number 7, yes, sir.
Yeah, 4 is good too. 4 is also good. The 4
really
is free safety, and Cam Bullock is a true strong safety. They're both good. They play very well together.
Yeah, they're great together. So it's been fun to see them develop and continue. So, all right, last but not least, ending the show. This is episode 2 of the Victory Bell Selection Show. Jamal, biggest surprise for you for this UCLA Bruin team's good, bad, indifferent. What do you thought?
Yeah, Ryan, I think Will the Thrill nailed it. When does he not, in terms of his on-the-field diagnosis? I want to double-click on something that I think Alfred talked about, and that is the off-the-field culture. I would argue there is not a team in America that has gone through more adversity in the 2022 season than the UCLA Bruins. When you start to talk at the beginning of the year, they were the national joke about attendance and the memes and the tweets, and the national attention was flying. They have been dealing with the challenges of moving to the Big Ten in a way USC has not. USC can put their feet up, get ready for this Big Ten. UCLA has been hounded by the regions, by Cal, by the governor, by state politics, have had to deal with all of that and continue to have to deal with it. They've had to deal with getting a lot of heat on this network, included from me included, about the way they celebrated after the wins against South Alabama and all the things that go on in their locker room. It feels like week after week after week, UCLA has to deal with things. And now, oh, by the way, they're ranked 12th in the CFP poll, even though they have the second most top 25 wins in America in 2, behind only Tennessee's 3. And that's because the chair of the CFP committee is the athletic director for NC State, who's still really steaming over UCLA backing out of the Holiday Bowl last year because of COVID. And it feels awfully personal. And so when you stack all of that together, there hasn't been a team in America that's dealt with more off the field. And Ryan, I live a couple of blocks from the UCLA campus. I sit on the UCLA board. I talk to a lot of people. I get a sense of the vibe and the energy. Everyone around this program has said week over week, day after day, the practices feel different. The culture around the team feels different. There is a seriousness with the coaches that was not there in years past. There's a camaraderie between the players that was not there in years past. And there is a total comfort in their skin about who they are and what they're trying to achieve. And so for me, what's the most remarkable element about this season is they're 8-1. They could potentially be 9-1 to go up against SC. Single season record for wins in a season for UCLA in their history is 10. They have an opportunity to break the single season wins record for them as a program after having to go through all of this year because of the culture and the atmosphere that's been created. And I think Alfred hit the nail on the head. Chip has cracked the code on how to do this moving forward, because when you look at facilities, when you look at campus, when you look at academics, when you look at alumni, there's really nothing USC has that UCLA doesn't have. The only difference is access to top talent consistently because of the academic requirements. And now Chip has found a way to navigate that. And if he can navigate that and continue to build this culture, thanks to the Jerry Neuheisels, thanks to the Deshaun Fosters, thanks to the Ken Norton Juniors, the sky's the limit for this team. So far and away, the most pleasant surprise for me is the UCLA culture.
Love it. Good stuff, as always, from our entire panel. That is episode 2 of the Victory Bell Selection Show. Will Decker, Bruin Bible host, Jamal Madney, our Bruin beat writer and LA Football Show host, Phil Robinson, beat writer for USC Trojans and host of Salute to Troy, Coach Rowe, host of Salute to Troy, and high school football coach. Are those middle fingers? Or those?
No, I'm going to start putting up 2 1s for 11 national championships.
Oh, okay. There you go.
I thought you were flipping us off, bro.
I'm like, damn.
One national championship. One finger versus 2 finger.
The prestige of USC and all of
we're putting up 4s. Rose doing the double finger. I'm just like, my gosh, this got heated, man.
I guess next week I'm just gonna break out my rings because last time I checked, SD owns a Rose Bowl.
Well, hey, that's going to be the conversation on episode 3, because then we'll be actually really previewing this year's game. We can get into the actual big time rivalry and how these two teams will clash. So make sure to tune in for that. Appreciate you all. This is the Victory Bell Selection Show here on the LA Football Network. Everyone take care. We'll talk to you all soon.